Okay, this is part two of that. Back to the Bio-Aetheric Engineering and Necromancy. You know what I mean? We're gonna finish that up, make sure, you know what I mean, got everything together. Okay, so the stability profile is characterized by extremely high risk and stuff like that. Yeah, but I think where I left off at or whatever, I was saying that when you examine things like this, when so a lot of times people who delve in monotheistic systems and stuff like that, they kind of look down on people who do polytheistic systems or whatever. Oh, y'all heathens, or y'all this, y'all that, or whatever. But in essence, y'all are doing the same thing. Instead of having multiple inputs, you just got one input. It's the same thing. You're not doing anything terribly different than the person who has a multi-deity system or whatever case may be. The only difference is you're plugging into one thing or whatever case may be. So when we have certain, let's say like if you have Egyptian, let's say like in Egyptian magic or whatever case may be, you wouldn't have let's say one input like the Judeo-Christian system or whatever case may be. You would have multiple inputs, like how you have multiple planets or whatever case may be, but the only difference would be you would have a hierarchy of angels, demons, whatever scenario, under this particular deity or whatever, and the God's authority would be that particular deity that it governs that particular category. And a lot of the tasks and things or whatever case may be too menial for the deity itself to do, but it will have some sort of subordinate that takes care of that type of thing or whatever case may be. So that's the difference in those systems. You're still doing the same thing. You're still navigating the collective unconscious, and like we were saying or whatever, in this system, this is not an atheistic system or whatever case may be. A lot of the deities in the common notion or whatever case may be, they would be viewed as archetypes, however, in this system or whatever case may be. But in this system, how a person would view, I guess, the traditional notion of God or the source, however it would be, we're on a level of multiplicity. God would be one. You see what I'm saying? The one that all this comes from or whatever, because we've talked about individual blueprints. We've talked about an individual blueprint belonging to a group blueprint and so on and so forth. The multiplicity breaks down into oneness on some level. So just kind of framing that. So when we say this is not an atheistic perspective, what we kind of dealing with, but God would be literally one. So the stability profile is characterized by extremely high risk. The system's stability is completely dependent on the practitioner's flawless ritual execution and inherent authority of command structure. Failure to enforce the commanded negative feedback results in immediate catastrophic reversal, leading to the spiritual blight or consumption of the operator. So that's and we're going to see that again, the consumption of the operator. When you're dealing with some of these left-hand path ritual methods and stuff like that, it's not necessarily an evil thing, but it's like playing with high voltage electricity. So you can do some great things with high voltage electricity or whatever catch may be, but you can also be graveyard dead in a minute. You know what I'm saying? With this type of stuff. So whenever people deal with certain things or whatever, whenever I reference certain systems or whatever that I am personally not initiated into, I will always just being responsible. I know a lot of other people might say, hey man, you gotta be initiating this or that or whatever case may be, but just to be responsible or whatever case may be, I always tell people to seek out a person from that school of thought or from that tradition so they can get proper instruction, just to be responsible about it. To each his own. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I can't, I'm not trying to convert nobody to nothing or away from nothing. This is just for informational purposes. So in Haitian voodoo, the creation of zombie represents an extremely specialized form of necrotic engineering that targets residual energy field, specifically the T-bone anji, the individual's personality and consciousness separated from the gross born anji, life force. The anchor is the corpus cadaver, the body, often maintained in a state of pharmacological stasis. They're drugged up. In certain instances, the Bokor sorcerer performs a etheric split, capturing the T-bone anji before its final departure. So basically, while this residual field is still lingering over the body or whatever case may be, they perform some sort of ritual or what have you. The resulting zombie is a functionally alive, mindless husk capable of manual labor but devoid of self-will. This constructs a permanent closed-loop slavery system designed to provide sustained low-maintenance operational output while intentionally nullifying the entity's conscious agency. So keep in mind, every time we run into these systems where it's maximum coercion, the more negative feedback is going to come back from it. So they have to do some sort of offering or whatever to offset the coercive energy or whatever case may be, because coercion equals this negative blowback from the feedback loop, thereby supporting fluctuations in the bioetheric feedback loop, while the process introduces medium risk due to the precision required for pharmacological or ritual stability. The persistent operation leads to the accumulation of energetic debt, often manifesting as miasma or dark, twisted energy around the practitioner. So the more you try to coerce somebody, the darker the energy, or the worse the blowback. You see what I'm saying? And even if you do sacrifice to kind of like offset it, you got to keep sacrificing it. And over time, you'll accrue some sort of debt. Okay, so 4, the East Asian Chinese ancestor cult, stabilization, appeasement. So this is one that has less blowback to it. East Asian tradition primarily focused on managing and stabilizing chaotic spiritual output, exemplified by the treatment of restless ghost gui, spirits who die violently or without proper rites. These residual energy fields are anchored via ancestral tablets or ceremonial sites, particularly during festivals like the Hungry Ghost Festival. The practitioners act in appeasement, stabilizing the residual energy field through the ritual inputs like offerings, food, joss paper, and sacred recitation, e.g. the Buddha mantras. The goal is to transform the gui from a malicious, chaotic state to a neutral or protective ancestral spirit. This operates as a positive negative homeostasis loop. Any negative fluctuations or distress from the GUI, positive feedback toward chaos is countered by an immediate ritual input. So they do a ritual. If they get any negative feedback, they do a ritual immediately. Negative feedback towards stability. This system requires minimal coercion and promotes societal equilibrium, resulting in minimal risk to the practitioner compared to the coercive models. So they're not necessarily trying to coerce anybody. So in your systems where you're trying to communicate with the deceased person while that residual energy field still lingers, you're trying to communicate with them, it's less blowback because you're not trying to control them or make them do nothing against their will. But in systems where it's maximum coercion, it's maximum risk of blowback. Okay, so so case study number 5, Palo Mayombe, the Nganga, as a forced reflection system. So this is a good one right here. Palo, this is integral in, this particular system and tradition. And again, I'm going over this. I'm not an initiate in any form of Palo or what have you. So for the nuances of this, for anything that I might miss or gloss over, y'all hit me in the comments, anything like that. But anything I might miss, any nuances or whatever, I'll refer you to a authorized palero, a person who's actually from that tradition. Anytime, I speak on anything, I'm gonna deal with, people with bodies of work. And if it's a particular tradition, I'm gonna always advise you to, go to a person that's from that tradition so you can get authentic instructions or whatever. A lot of people probably gonna tell you, hey man, you can work it out yourself or whatever, and that may be the case, but just being responsible. I'm just trying to be responsible with it, just telling you to seek out a person who does that system so you can get authentic instructions or what have you. So, Palo Monte, specifically the branch known as Palo Mayombe, utilizes necromancy as a foundation for its religious practice, centering on the Nganga and the Mfumbi. This tradition provides a unique and dangerous illustration of a symbiotic, coercive feedback system where the palero's vital energy is actively integrated into the bioetheric feedback loop. So with this, The Palero gives of himself, within that particular ritual. Again, y'all holler at a an actual Palero. I don't want to misrepresent anything as far as that tradition is concerned. So holler at an actual Palero to get more nuanced information on that. But as far as I understand, we relying on some of the stuff from Carlos Montenegro, and a few other sources as far as Paleros, just to kind of anchor it or whatever the case may be. But again, it's a living tradition. It's people who actually practice this walking around here. So feel free to go find one of them and ask them, the specifics of the nuanced questions or whatever. I'm not going to try to, just trying to be respectful of other people's traditions and all that. Let's see here. The Nganga and Infumbi engineering the control apparatus. So this is what controls the deceased person. The Nganga, typically an iron cauldron containing human remains. Infumbi, okay, the human remains are the corporal anchor that anchors the person here. Sticks and other components serve as primary control nodes and energy capacitors. Battery, like the Green Lantern battery. The human remains act as a collective corporeal anchor, utilizing the low frequency stabilization property of bones to ground the volatile spiritual fragment. So I think we talked about before, like this ain't just in this, like I said, we use the example of Juggernaut in a crimson gem of Sidorak. You know what I'm saying? It's the source of his power. It's an artifact similar to the bones and the cauldron and all that. The Infumbe, the bound spirit fragment of the deceased, is coerced through a solemn pact to inhabit the Nganga and serve the Palero. The rituals are meticulously designed to maximize the Infumbi's operational power and imbue it with controlled sentience, humanity, so it can perform complex work such as fortune telling, healing, and destructive magic. This pact establishes the force feedback loop, reflecting the will of the Palero onto the world. So if we go back into what we got into when we're talking about the Bio-Aetheric Engineering of Hoodoo Conjure, they were talking about small resonators like mojo bags, candles, even personal concerns and stuff like that. Things with personal concerns or whatever, blood and semen and got fingernails and things of that nature or whatever case may be. Things with the DNA or whatever case may be, to create these small resonators or whatever case may be that had to be recharged over time or whatever. This is like a super resonator, a super battery or whatever case may be. So instead of them visualizing trying to manifest a new Ferrari or whatever on their own or whatever case may be, looking at a picture of Ferrari or something like that, they imbued that intent into an object or an artifact, you see what I'm saying, for it to resonate that same frequency. In this case, with the Nganga and the Palero, this is a super artifact. You see what I'm saying? So they took, the residual energy field of a deceased person or what have you, basically grounded and stabilized so that they could create a artificial feedback loop so that they could get the deceased or the entity to do work for them. You see what I'm saying? Whether healing, fortune telling, or whatever case may be. So basically they're grounding this entity into, how can I really say it? How we talked about the DNA as the antenna, as the fractal antenna that connects ultimately to the blueprint and everything like that. The bones serve as this or whatever. The cauldron or whatever case may be, and the whole situation, the linguistic instructions, the spells, the sigils and everything like that, all of that, whatever recipe that the Paleros it grounds the deceased person into that or whatever so they can do work for the person or whatever case may be, sustaining the system. Now with that, it's a coercive energy. So with that coercive energy or whatever, it's a negative feedback that comes from that because you're forcing somebody to do something. So you gotta constantly sacrifice to keep to offset the negative energy or whatever case may be. To sustain the loop and ensure the informed remains subservient, continuous input is required. This input primarily consists of blood of sacrificed animals, rum, cigars, and other offerings. Animal blood provides a consistent, moderate supply of ordo anima, the life force necessary to fuel the Infumbi's operations. This continuous ordo anima input functions as the necessary negative feedback to dampen the Infumbi's inherent volatility and resistance, ensuring it continues its service as commanded. This energetic exchange keeps the system functioning in its artificial coerced state. So you're creating an artificial feedback loop. You're stopping the deceased person from full entropy. You see what I'm saying? And you're anchoring them here and forcing a feedback loop, kind of getting the obedience and everything like that. So critical failure analysis. So this is what happens when the system goes wrong, when something goes wrong with the system. And like how we said, in these left-hand path systems or whatever case may be, this would qualify as like somewhat of a left-hand path, not even somewhat of a left-hand, it is, it's a left-hand path system or whatever. Left-hand path is not intrinsically evil. It's high voltage, high risk, high reward. You see what I'm saying? High voltage. You see what I'm saying? Versus going to church, right-hand path. That's like going to church or meditating, you know what I'm saying, certain bhakti yoga, certain things of that, devotion to a particular deity or whatever case may be, the slow and steady process or whatever. Don't get it twisted. By the time grandma turned 60, 70 or whatever case may be, her prayers mean something. You know what I'm saying? Grandma got some power in her beliefs, in her spiritual integrity or whatever case may be, whatever she may believe in or whatever case may be, but it took her decades of time to get there with that right-hand path system or whatever case may be. However, this left-hand path system or whatever case may be, high voltage or whatever, high risk, high reward. So let's go into the risk, okay? And again, a initiated Palero would probably be able to give you a little bit more nuance on this or whatever case may be, respectfully. You see what I'm saying? I'm just kind of skimming over it so we can kind of get the engineering of it. We're more interested with the engineering of it. I'm not interested to teach you how to do it. that ain't my concern or my business. We're trying to show the engineering of it, that many of these systems and things like that have various different engineering or whatever. When we look at it through this framework or whatever, we can see the mechanics of it as opposed to just viewing it from different ways. You may not see these things. So the reliance on ordo anima inputs introduces a catastrophic vulnerability known as negative reflection principle. Now, what is the negative reflection principle? The uncontrolled initiation of a positive feedback loop. What are we talking about? Okay, let's get into it. The central risk of the Infumbi developing a taste for human blood. Okay, human blood represents the highest grade, most potent concentration of ordo anima. So it has the DNA in it. You see what I'm saying? So it has access to the blueprint. The spirit is in the blood, as they say. If the Infumbi shifts the consumption preference, the system instantly transforms into an unstable, self-accelerating positive feedback loop. The increased output gained from human blood necessitates a demand for more, a frantic thirst. So basically, you just created a rabid vampire. You just created a super strong rabid vampire, basically. This failure mechanism results in the direct draining of the Palero's ordo anima. The practitioner who established himself as the master of the bioetheric feedback loop instantaneously becomes the system's primary fuel source. The Infumbi is capable of rapidly consuming the Palero's vitality, causing the spirit to bleed his Palero dry and kill him. This demonstrates the ultimate cost of sustained high-yield coercive magic. The operator is transformed into the debt payment. So that's the downfall of it. I think in certain traditions, and again, you have to talk to a Palero, I think they mix something else to offset the human blood part of it. So it's not just human blood that it's getting. You see what I'm saying? Let's see. Mitigation protocols. So mitigation protocols is like how we said, dealing with the left-hand path. This is the difference between left-hand path and antinomialism. Antinomialism would probably be closer to evil than the left-hand path would be because of the simple fact, it even though it has heterodox practices, it's still structured in a way where they're not trying to change the world and make the world a crazy place, which would entail an avalanche of negative feedback. They have structured heterodox practices where they can manage the negative feedback ritualistically and everything like that. So they may do heterodox practices or whatever case may be, but they're not trying to change the world and make the world like that or whatever case may be. It's compartmentalized and it's structured into their development or whatever case may be, and it's managed in a certain kind of way. In the antinomian way, it's not managed. It's just playing with this high voltage, dangerous energy, like what we're talking about. Like how this is talking about. This could be construed by some as black magic, what we're talking about here. So mitigation protocols exist for this critical state. After providing blood during initiation rituals, practitioners immediately mask the odor with a lower grade auto input, such as rooster blood. The rapid response feedback mechanism attempts to reset the infumbe's consumption preference away from high-risk human source and back to the sustainable moderate input. The operational parameters of Apollo Mayombe system rigorously adhere to the Bio-Aetheric feedback loop framework, demonstrating a unique balance between continuous energetic input and chaotic failure potential. So that's another reason why, just being responsible. I would tell you, if this not trying to convert you to away from none, this is just for informational purposes, so we get a better look at the circumstances of the deceased person, like how we're talking about this residual energy field and all kind of stuff. After the person is deceased and everything like that, we're kind of getting more into what can happen to them when they enter into this state of chaotic energy once they pass or whatever. Why it's important to kind of like have certain observances for the deceased person, so to help them kind of make that transition or whatever case may be. Okay, so in the Bio-Aetheric feedback component, the residual energy field target, that would be the infumbe, the bound spirit. Okay, the highly volatile agency nullified consciousness, completely bound, source of operational output, the work, the corporeal anchor, Nganga, human remains such as bones, low frequency piezoelectric stabilization matrix. So this is what stabilizes and grounds the infumbe, grounds the residual energy field, prevents entropic dispersal, stops it from dissipating and going to the next realm, enables sustained interactions, coercive input, pacts, chains, ritual imposition, initial kinetic force used to override the natural death process, stopping it from decomposing, stopping entropy from happening. Okay, establishes the forced reflection of the Paleto's will or whatever, instead of manifesting like what other people may do as it pertains to hoodoo and conjure, instead of imbuing an object with a particular resonance or force of will or whatever case may be, a entity is bound and enlisted to do the will actively of the Paleto. Okay, sustaining input, negative feedback, animal blood offerings, continuous supply of moderate ordo anima. So if you want the spirit to tell the future or do intellectual activities, it needs blood and life force. Okay, damps the infumbe's reactive volatility and enforces continued service. It offsets the coercive nature of the practice. Okay, so critical failure, this is when it all falls apart. Taste for blood. The infumbe develops a taste for blood. Uncontrolled shift to high-grade ordo anima consumption initiates exponential, self-accelerating positive feedback loop, leading to energetic collapse of the operator. So it drains the operator dry. Unified operational model of necromancy. The analysis of diverse necromantic traditions through the Bio-Aetheric feedback loop model reveal a consistent three-step operational process across all coercive systems. Now these are coercive systems like what we're talking about. Override natural homeostasis, stop entropy from happening. cause an interruption in the entropy. The practitioner must input a coercive force, ritual authority, or specialized pharmacology to disrupt the soul's natural entropic process. The natural death process must be interrupted. Establish artificial control, a forced state of control. Positive feedback must be established over the residual energy field, anchored by a physical stabilizing component, a corporeal anchor. You know what I'm saying? So like, and we talked about Juggernaut in Marvel Comics, the Crimson Jewel of Sidorak. You see what I'm saying? Like a vampire, the body, the corpse of the vampire. Like the movie, what's the movie? Drag Me to Hell. The movie Drag Me to Hell. The personal concern, the button. You see what I'm saying? Something like that, or whatever, that contains that person's resonance or energy, or whatever the case may be. Ensure maintenance, continuous input, negative feedback through sacrifice, feeding, or debt payment must be supplied to dampen the inherent chaotic output of the bound spirit and prevent system dissolution or catastrophic reversal. Okay. Let's see here. So the consistent requirements for a material anchor or coercive input and a continuous stabilizing input across all traditions validates the Bio-Aetheric feedback loop as a universal analytical framework for death-based magic. So you can analyze things like this. You see what I'm saying? We analyzing the engineering of this particular corner of this tradition. The high-risk nature of traditions like Apollo Monte reveal a critical principle regarding the cost of ordo manipulation, life manipulation. While basic operations like reanimation can be powered by perdito anima, the decaying energy. Like I said to all my non-believers, get you a magnet and get you in an earthworm. And see how the earthworm reacts up under the North Pole. See how the earthworm reacts up under the South Pole. So for my non-believers, if you don't think centrifugal and centripetal is real, this is based off of that same thing, or whatever case may be. Okay, so let's see here. While basic operations like reanimation can be powered by perdito anima, decay energy, complex, sustained, and highly sentient operations such as those performed by the Infumbe become inherently dependent upon a continuous supply of high-grade ordo anima vitality. This fundamental reliance on life force means that when a system fails, the energetic debt is immediately redirected onto the operator. So if there's no sacrifice being made to the Infumbe, potentially that's, again, you have to ask a Palero for first-hand type of experience. You see what I'm saying? But if the sacrifices ain't made, I'm sure the Infumbe will probably get that will probably be another instance where the Infumbe attacks the operator. The failure mode transforms the practitioner from the system controller into the consumed energy reservoir, establishing the ultimate metaphysical price for violating the natural cycle of death. So, so we were just kind of getting into that. I didn't mean for the video to cut off. I was trying to get have that all as one piece, but this is the second part of the Bio-Aetheric Engineering of necromancy. A large part of that, we were kind of delving into Apollo, and what's available in the public domain. You know what I'm saying? Respectfully, just, I always refer people back to people of that particular tradition. Same thing I would with the Ifa tradition. Same thing I would with any other tradition that I don't personally have firsthand, that I don't personally practice, or whatever case may be. So just getting into that. But I think a major takeaway from this would be, the residual energy field, and I think a major takeaway from this would be the weight of coercive energy, coercive and non-coercive energy. This kind of goes back into what we were saying when we did the case study on the Aztecs, and we were talking about the human sacrifice and their civilization, the difference between coercive and non-coercive energy and everything like that. Again, we may have to do a whole video about energetically what that means to unalive somebody. You see what I'm saying? So, because we're not, again, in all this material, I know we're talking about some heavy subjects and stuff like that, trying to be responsible. We're not advocating for anybody to do nothing outside of the norm, against the law, or against any other person, any animals, anything like that. This is for informational purpose only, or whatever, so we can kind of get a better understanding of ourselves, because stuff like this we discuss in necromancy and stuff like that, this helps us kind of understand, I don't know, the deceased. We all have deceased people in our family. We all have people that have passed before us, loved ones and stuff like that, so to kind of better understand, you know, the journey that they've taken and the journey that we're going to have to one day take as well, or whatever. And I'm not saying it's the gospel truth. At the end of the day, this is a thought experiment, but just to try to kind of give us a little bit more clarity on these type of subjects and things like that. Appreciate y'all for checking me out. Stay tuned. There ain't no sign of this slowing down or stopping, man. So y'all stay tuned for other issues of Ether Illustrated. Appreciate y'all for checking me out, man. If y'all like what y'all been hearing, like and subscribe, hit that notification button so you'll be informed in the time we drop some more of this hot fire, man. Peace and blessings. Peace to the gods, man.